for a fantastic effort yesterday. I must personally say that yesterday I was a little more confused. Today I can see that the amount of effort that's really gone into it is fantastic. So the first question, you did a budget last year and barely 9 months later you've done another budget. In fact, less than 7 months later. Like, which was the tougher budget to do?
First of all, thank you. Thank you for being so candid. And yes, it was a budget where one had to put a lot of effort. I don't know if I should rate this or that, but I will, as being difficult, that is. But one thing is very clear. In this budget, to the credit of the ministry, to the credit of the officials who were working with me, and thanks to the Prime Minister, who has given so much of time getting involved in every layer of preparation, because he was hearing from the industry, from the common man, from whoever he was meeting about what has got to be in the budget. So he kept giving us inputs. We kept approaching him to see what is it that which will be possible. So this interaction was not just prior to the preparation of this budget, but since after July, when we were post the budget, meeting and talking to industries, because each one had different type of stress that they were undergoing, and we had to respond to that, which we kept doing, partly, fully, depending on where we could do how much. But then, even from then, many of those discussions and suggestions which happened, which were given to us, had not been left aside. We've addressed the issue partly, fully, and therefore that's over, we moved. No, we didn't do that. We sort of responded, but carried the rest with us. And those also were part of the budget making process this time. So in a way, it wasn't 3 weeks, 1 month before the budget, but it was a completely long drawn post July 19 preparation for the budget. So this would have been one of those budget. If of course there are experts, domain experts who look at budget, Ministry of Finance, how things happen here and all that, I am sure they would make their own research and analysis. This probably was one of those budgets where an extensive, almost a 360-degree view taken in depth, and a call taken given the circumstance, and had to balance in such a way that there is a certain discipline, but yet addressing the issue of giving the impetus.
So this is something I must say from the heart, that I have seen very few finance ministers. I have seen finance ministers from the time of Manmohan Singh. I mean, the level of feedback you have been willing to take is stupendous, as opposed to saying that, look, I know everything, I will do everything. You have said that, look, I may not know certain things, but I will do that. I think that seems to have fed a lot into the budget. Would I say, is that right?
Absolutely right. And that was necessary also, because not to miss out on various sections which had differing problems, rightly. Problems are unique to each one of them. So we had to hear them from their side, one. And second, I always have felt strongly that unless the solutions come from those affected, many times accommodatable, sometimes not, but unless the solutions come from those affected, giving a solution which you think is all very good may not be the solution they want. So we had to be open-minded about the way in which people expected some solutions to the problems they wanted.
Right. This budget has an overload of initiatives on many fronts. I mean, you've done for infrastructure, MSMEs, tax reform, agriculture, all kinds of things. I mean, I have not named all of them. So do you feel that this is, you will face a challenge on implementing them? Because I mean, each one of them is almost like a one-year job. I mean, if you say you're going for MSMEs, for example, if you're going to do the factor markets and credit default swaps and all those other things, how are you going to be on the implementation side? I think the budget's real work seems to begin after the budget is presented.
No doubt, yes. It is after the presentation of the budget, the actual work begins and the sweating out starts there. But I had to also do so many different things equally in this budget. So it was not just to give an impression that I am addressing so many issues, but the economy needs it. I have to include as many sections as I can, because there is no one trigger point to, as they say, get the animal spirits alive. Now I have to look at addressing so many different sections, give each one a chance to push ahead as speedily as they can. So the intent was to keep every section on your radar.
Right.
So otherwise you are not going to be able to give that kind of a advantage to everyone to move together, because it's not going to be one engine pulling the whole economy. It has got to be everybody joining in.
Right. So coming to some specific proposals, one thing is on the personal taxes. You have created a new tax structure which is minus most of the exemptions that you have given, right? Have you any assessment of how many of your current taxpayers might actually shift to that? Do you have some estimate, or you feel you have to wait and see?
I'll give you two answers to that. We have done some assessment on what would make people to shift from the old to the new. We've also sort of roughly calculated what it would mean in terms of revenue foregone. But it's also very difficult to be the margin of error has to be very less is fine. But in this case, I really cannot assure a very narrow margin of error, because with 120 exemptions in our taxation now, for each individual, the permutation and combination of those exemptions will vary so differently that it might be difficult for me to say it will be less attractive for somebody who is using exemption A, C, K, Z, and for somebody else who is using exemptions B, Q, L, M. Permutation and combination, if I can use big data and sort that out per taxpayer, sometime I will be able to arrive. But given the limitation in time, we could only broadly take one thumb rule as a given, and that is, for those in the lower income brackets, there will be a greater reason to believe through the exemption what they get may not be substantial if you consider moving to the new one without exemptions. And when I say without exemptions, the new one also has a few exemptions, the list of which has been released last week.
NTS and all that.
That's right.
So the 40,000 crore could be overshot or undershot, right?
Yes, you can say that, but the fact is, largely, and also here, we have not really gone on a discretionary selection of those exemptions to be brought into the newer system. The newer system eventually all of us would want, and I am not speaking just for the government, as citizens also, all of us would want in the newer system, at least progressively, a complete removal of all exemptions, make it simpler for compliance, and ideally make it less of a tax burden. So the rate will have to come down as much as possible. So if I am going in that route, the selection of those exemptions which have come into the newer one now is not discretionary, but based on some principle, and that principle is income in some form, which is or saving from a tax paid income. These cannot be excluded at this stage. And therefore, we brought only those exemptions into the newer screen, otherwise left everybody with an option. You want to stay there? No harm, please do.
But at some point you might need to merge the two systems, right?
I will have to go in the path which I have set for myself in the new scheme. Gradually, I allow the old to be less attractive and the new to be so attractive that all of them would want to shift.
What is the reasoning behind creating 6 tax slabs?
Only because we want the movement from one to another to be the gradient to be lesser, smoother, not a sharp gradient.
Okay, so coming to the DDT, which obviously is a very sensible move, there seems to be some concern in the high tax brackets that you might end up having to pay 42% tax because you have a super tax there for people, does that mean that suppose I am a big business owner and I get huge amounts as dividends, I will end up having to pay 42%. Will that remain, or will you be making some modifications there?
See, at this stage, in order to have those people who own shares but who are not in the high income bracket, essentially today's priority is to have more money in the hands of people.
Right.
Now, if I am looking at more money in the hands of the people, immediate approach would be for those who want to either make a spending out of it or saving out of it or an investment out of it. Now, if I am looking at people and with the broader principle that gradually Indian stock market should be opened for retailers as much as possible. Again, going one step backwards, we want people to have several options of earning out of their money, tax paid money. Not just through fixed deposits in banks, not through what is a very low risk savings in post office. I need people to also get into the stock market, buy shares, buy debts, meaning buy bonds. So, if you are able to open up that avenue and have many people get into that market, I should give them an attractive proposition.
Right.
And that is not pay 15% through the company which deducts the DDT.
Correct.
So, once I liberate that and the company does not have to do the DDT and it goes to the hands of the shareholder who has to pay it at the applicable rate, I expect those who are paying 15 or lesser to be able to see that they are paying less on the dividend that they are earning.
Absolutely.
So, that is the first assumption. Now, gradually of course, I will have to make it not high for others who are investing in shares and rationalize it.
Right.
I will do it sometime.
Okay.
But this first step, given in today's economy's context, I need people to have that option in their hand to pay less.
There is some concern that people who are planning to launch InvITs and those kind of things, that this dividend tax might be some kind of deterrent to them. Is there some thinking that you might need to give them some exemption or something?
Are you talking about investors from outside?
Yeah.
No, I understand InvITs and REITs.
Yeah.
But are you talking about those who are investing from outside? If it is within India and it's a small investor, he has the same treatment in the sense he pays less. But for large investors coming from abroad, of course we have treaties with countries. There will be a TDS, and the rate applicable as per the treaty within the countries will come to play. And in that, I expect for those countries where there are no treaties, we'll probably will have to give an explanation as to how they will be treated. So that explanation should be coming out today sometime. So you will get a more elaborate.
And when it comes to one of the big things which probably the markets went into a tailspin yesterday was they expected something on the LTCG. Do you think that and DDT between them probably depressed the markets more than anything else? What's your assessment?
I agree, the expectation could have been we want DDT cleared, we want long term capital gains cleared, I want STT cleared, I want anything else. And the situation for me is, yes, this government wants a lot of opening up. We want to be attractive investment destination, agreed. But I also want a reasonable revenue to drive my programs. Again, to be fair, when was the long term capital gains introduced? Not even 2.5, 3 years ago. And in the 3 years, by the time I have to have some revenues coming in that, the markets were not really so bullish, and as a result, my expected revenue through the long term capital gains is yet to gain its prime. I am not waiting for it to gain its prime, but it is also not even taken off in a way. So quickly I am asked to remove it, because some argue that you are not really gaining much out of it. But have I been given reasonable time even to gain anything out of it?
Correct. That's right.
So the hesitation on LTCG was on those grounds. I think it's too early for me to even think of negating the possibility. At the same time, I do not also want to close the option. I leave it there. But I have given the DDT.
Right.
You may still think from the point of view of those who are paying more than 15% as their applicable rate.
Right.
But that's one section. The other section is what I've also aimed at.
That's right.
And for them, there's no grievance.
There's no problem. That's right. Two other important questions. One is on your disinvestment target. So really a massive 2 lakh crores or 2.05 lakh crores, right? Now, how do you really expect to do that? Of course, some of it is already in motion, like Air India and
That's
DTCL
right.
and all. But that still leaves a very huge chunk for next year, right? Which we have never achieved. So do you think
No.
it's too stiff a target?
Not at all.
Acha.
Only because if I had said something in July, ideally, if July were to have been February 1st of 2019, I would have had a full year in my hand.
Right.
But it happened in July.
Okay.
And I've had only about exactly 7 months,
Yes.
say to tomorrow, day after.
Right.
And within that 7 months, those which were listed to be privatized and mentioned during the budget or before that through a cabinet approval, the motion is on, and I think the traction gained is substantial, and I strongly believe it will happen. But happen when? Not before 31st March. As a result, although that was mentioned there, and although the progression in that is satisfactory or more than satisfactory, the real advantage is going to happen into the next fiscal. So I really can't account for that in my books now.
Right.
So that will have to go into the next year.
Right.
So next year's estimate, therefore, does have that also in mind.
Right. So you have a massive program all through the year of disinvestment.
That's right, and that is where a lot of energy has to go. And to the credit of the small department which manages this affair, Deepam, even as they were doing all this, the legwork for getting all these going on, look at the way they handled the ETF.
That's right.
That's not disinvestment. But look at the way they handled the ETF. They handled a second one in the last couple of days.
That's right.
And managed to have very good response in them. So yes, the government is moving on so many different fronts.
Right.
And there are clearly successful conclusion of some. And I expect the same tone and tenor will govern the disinvestment also.
So the big bombshell was LIC. So do you expect that to happen in the next fiscal year, or is it something that's just a process that's been initiated?
We've only said initial public offer.
Right. So what do you expect that to happen next year?
Yes, I'm planning for it.
Okay. So is it a large part of next year's disinvestment target apart from this year's rollover?
How can it be? It can't be a large part.
It's a very small amount. Okay. Coming to your direct tax appeals, which you have given them some kind of amnesty, that if they pay up by 31st of March, they don't have to pay the penalties and all that. Is there an estimate of how much of money is pending in such appeals, and what is your expectation in terms of the percentage who might accept the offer?
Of course, we have an estimate.
Based on what happened with the indirect tax things last time?
No, but even otherwise, we have an estimate. We have a number of the disputed tax amount and an amount which is over and above, but on it as interest, as penalty, and so on. All that is there. Right. And I've even disclosed the number of cases that involve this whole thing.
We have a number, overall number on that?
4,83,000 cases or something like that.
No, the amounts?
Yes, we have the amount. I have not disclosed.
Okay.
Because end of the day, the taxable amount is something which nobody can touch. The amount is there.
Correct.
That's a claim by Government of India. Nobody is going to be able to touch it.
So he has to accept your claim, then he gets to settle.
If he accepts the claim, he settles without paying the interest, penalty, interest on the penalty, and so on. So as a result, I expect quite a good response in it. Of course, people with very big disputes, like the way it was in the indirect tax, majority of whom came in. Here too, I expect majority to come in with before 31st March.
Right. On GST, you didn't say much in the budget. Of course, there are some references to it, but obviously it's a work in progress. So do you have a timeline by which key issues like say technology, compliance, and the simplification will actually get done.
I did mention about that,
Yeah.
particularly. If you had raised anything else, it's a different issue. But since you're raising this particular issue of technology, compliance, and a particular date before,
And simplification.
and simplification, these three I have mentioned specifically that from 1st April 2020, this year, the newer version of tax returns will come into force. The pilot testing is all going on, and Infosys has been very clearly spoken to. I've met with Nandini Likani and said the system has to be simplified. We have to have compliance top of the agenda. So that addressing the compliance is happening, and the new system is coming. As regards simplification and reduction in rate or rate rationalization, it's the council which has to take a call. We've given an elaborate presentation of what it means on two grounds. One, if the returns were going to have to meet the 14% compensation that we have to give, which was expected to be at that kind of a level, whereas the returns are now coming down, and also the returns based on the kind of value that it gives you, we've given a complete picture. I've also requested the council that rate reduction or increase in rate should not happen each time when the council meets. Every 3 months you have a set of goods on which you're doing something, services. So you're not able to at any one point in time to think of what your revenue generation is going to be like. It's going up, it's going down.
And also industry doesn't get the stability.
That's right. And even worse for us, sometimes the refunds are more than what you collect. So in some particular items, I mean. So we've requested the council to please think about it and take a call on it. If it can be done just once in a year, rate rationalization. And after we at least have a year, after we agree to this once in a year rate rationalization, we should at least have a year to understand what it means in terms of revenue generation. And post that, of course, we can freeze some things.
Right. And do you expect to move to a 3-rate structure anytime?
That's part of this.
Okay.
That's part of this.
And last question, you allowed the NRIs to tap into the government bond market. What was the thinking behind it? Is it to broaden the market, or is it how?
Broaden and deepen it.
Okay.
And that is why even when I was talking about the dividend distribution tax, when I was talking about the long-term capital gains, we are saying that we want Indian bond market to mature.
Right.
It should become deepened, and we need to have that advantage given to Indian.
Great. I have many more questions, but I think we are running out of time. So thank you, ma'am. It was a fantastic effort. Thank you for giving us the time. Thank you from Swarajya, the bottom of our heart.
Thank you very much.